Since the founding of the United States, we've either been at a literal war or a metaphorical war. Literal wars being the independence for our country in 1776, or the Civil War. I'm sure we have all heard about this in history class or some outside source. Or what about a metaphorical war? I'm sure you're probably even more familiar with this. The war on drugs, the war on crime, the war on poverty or homelessness, or maybe even more familiar with this, the culture war. The culture war was so popular in the 60s and the 70s with civil rights, and that was the most pressing issue, but there are of course more issues related in the 60s and 70s with pushes for multiple other things. And it's even more prevalent today. And I will get to this later in the video, but I'd like to make prevalent that all of these wars are still going on today in some form and some essence. With the independence of our country, we elected none other than a war hero, George Washington. And George Washington was the leader of the Continental Army, who defeated the British. According to the National Museum of the United States Army, quote, "He led the Continental Army to victory in the Revolutionary War, helped create the U.S. Constitution, and served as the first president of the United States. In particular, his superb leadership qualities allowed him to succeed throughout his life." End quote. After Washington left the presidency, almost every president except for FDR had the two-term policy and followed in his footsteps. And almost every president served in the military. To be exact, 31 presidents served in the military. If you want some comparison, 29 presidents were lawyers, and I believe about 15 presidents were businessmen or some other form of business. So as you see, with a quick aside here, with the birth of our nation, military is seen in a high regard, and so is the law. Military coming from George Washington, and law coming from Thomas Jefferson with him writing the Declaration of Independence. Military coming from George Washington leading the Continental Army, Thomas Jefferson writing these rules and regulations that we still follow today. Business, maybe you could argue, John Adams. There's tons of different ways and attributes that you could argue about how we construct our world today. And kind of going off of that quick aside, many of Americans today and in the past see the military as high regard. We see it as an act of service. You're dying for your country and you're upholding the Constitution. It is important to the country that the country is important to you. It's a one-to-one relationship and, in essence, a cyclical cycle. A war hero is, well, a hero to the political system. Think about John McCain in 2008 with President Obama that he had to fight against. John McCain was a prisoner of war, fighting for his country, upholding the Constitution, and President Obama was a leader, yes, but was also a lawyer. So, in essence, if you want to boil it down to everything, it was George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, those trains of thoughts. And again, a quick aside, they do follow that Federalist and Anti-Federalist, and I can make a video about that if you would like to. Comment down below, and I will explain that in another separate video. John McCain was a prisoner of war and was seen as a war hero in the political system because, well, if you're a war hero of your country, you're seen as a hero of the political system. And in some ways, that is true. Again, as I said earlier, if you're upholding the Constitution, you're going to want to uphold the Constitution in higher offices. So it only makes sense that he would want to run for president. So I bet you're kind of wanting to know what I want to have to say about the culture war. And Samuel P. Huntington, a political scientist, has some very interesting things to say about this. So in 1991, the USSR collapsed, and the Cold War had been going on for decades at this point. It was the United States versus the USSR, capitalism versus communism, freedom versus tyranny, and, well, the fall of democracy. But whether you believe that's true or not is up to you, the viewer. But he argues in his essay that we were technically united, or more united than we are today, because, well, we were united behind capitalism and the idea of anti-communism. And now, with the dissolve of that, we are more focused on the culture, that I am different than you, the viewer. And he says that wars will not be fought over capitalism or communism, but would rather be fought over wars like Syria, where it's rebel groups fighting each other. And he is right. We see that in the United States, and we see that in other countries. We're not united, but we're divided. To further emphasize Huntington's point, we're more divided and we're more polarized. As you've probably seen in either media or first-hand experience, my side is good, your side is bad, therefore it's black and white, therefore my culture is better than your culture. It's just not that. Again, a quick aside, I know the culture war does include things like canceling someone on Twitter or canceling media. That is not what this video is about. Instead, it's more so related to the culture of someone in a state or a country or a political system. That is not what this video is about. If you would like to see me make a video like that, please comment down below and maybe I will make something like that. But for now, I will continue with this. So to again emphasize Huntington's point, we were united earlier in our country's history with the Civil War. If you think about it, the Civil War was mainly about slavery. And if you do want to argue states' rights, that's completely fine. But it was Democrats versus Republicans mainly. And if you want to argue Whigs, that's fine too. But it was mainly on party lines. It was not as divided as we were today. I mean, well, again, I can make a separate video about this, but we were more united in the sense that we were divided. United along divided lines. I would also like to point out that 5 presidents who served in the Civil War, such as Grant and William McKinley, the president before Theodore Roosevelt, all served in the Civil War. And again, this kind of proves my point that if you serve in a war, you will probably assume some higher office, like a general, or maybe a police officer, or probably a president or senator. You are, again, using your leadership qualities to propel you to a higher position. So what's the solution, you may ask, to these problems with war? I would say it's to break down these stereotypes, these cultural barriers we've set for ourselves, and maybe just try and treat each other as humans, if it's so hard. I'm no expert, but I think these are goals that we can definitely ascertain. If you've liked this video, I hope it's reached you, and I hope it's come across your feed. Please consider subscribing. Please consider watching another one of my videos, and give me some feedback down below. Let me know if there's anything I can do better. If you have any recommendations for me. And yeah, I'll see you later.